Jyotsna Madan, I mean, you are somebody who sees patients, I'm sure, extensively with high risk pregnancy, that label. Now, the moment you tell a patient that yours comes under high risk, what do you, do you sense a fear, which seems to me obvious, and what do you tell such a patient and her family? If you could just...
Yeah, at the first visit when I see the patient, no patient we can call as low risk, actually speaking, but we still do label some of them as high risk depending on the existing conditions, medical problems what she has, or obstetric problem what she has. She falls under high risk pregnancy from the very beginning. But however, a patient who is otherwise does not have any high risk factors, she cannot be taken for granted that she's a low risk and she can sail through her pregnancy safely, because any time the risk factors can set in as the pregnancy is progressing. But of late, probably 2 decades back, teenage preemies pregnancy at the age of 16, 17 and 18 was much more commoner. That was the major high risk factor, and there were other risks associated because of the teenage pregnancy. But of late, what we see, what we label them as high risk at the first visit could be elderly gravide. They have been pregnant for the first time at the age of 35, 38, and in fact I have 2 patients who are 42 and spontaneous conception after 3-4 failed IVFs and having adopted a child. They have conceived, both of them have conceived now at the age of 42. So they come under high risk. And if they have been diabetic even before she is conceived, or she is hypertensive, or she has thyroid issue, or she is a patient with previous C-section scar, previous myomectomy scar, or any other cardiac problem, all these put her under high risk factor. So the reason we label them or highlight the risk factors so that we don't miss seeing certain things in future,
and perhaps because they shouldn't get more complacent.
Related to that high risk factor. So that's the reason we, on the first page itself, the first initial consultation, we put the label as high risk, and pertaining to that risk factor, we investigate them and probably do some extra scans, some extra blood tests and all that, see that that risk factor doesn't affect her pregnancy. And of late, I would like to put it to you, probably 3 decades back in India, diabetes complicating pregnancy was unheard of. 2 decades back, it was heard of, but not so very commonly. But now, probably, I would say 25% of our 20 to 25% of our urban population, pregnant women, are diabetic during pregnancy. So the term gestational diabetes mellitus has picked up in a great way. I don't know whether it's for the good or the bad, but then lot more diabetic patients we are seeing. We are becoming probably more experts in treating these high risk factors.
I'm sure India is a wealth of experiences for doctors in every field, because you come across conditions in almost every space there. Recently we read news reports of a cancer survivor, in fact, going on to have a normal delivery after some failed attempts. Yeah. But Dr. Bharti, I would like to ask you that, as Dr. Gayatri was mentioning, today's mother has Dr. Google at her fingertips, and probably we are living in a world of over-information and sort of cyber-crowding of data. But despite this, do you see that patients either do not know of exactly the choices? There is a need to make every mother aware of what choice or what right does she have in to choose to go for which sort of treatment or pregnancy. Do you think that that awareness is missing?
To be frank, yes, it is everyone's birth to choose their own, but always the doctor recommends for them the natural one followed. And yes, the awareness of each individual reduces the risk of the doctor, because it is easy for us to counsel. In West and the East it is the same, because they are not biased by anything, or it is not directed one. We just display what and all everything is going on, the pros, the cons, the do's and don'ts. It is up to them to choose. For example, see, they will be going to some shop, some jewelry shop or some clothes shop. What is the salesman? Just he displays everything. It is up to their choice. That is, they'll choose the shoe which fits in them. So they are the best statisticians, you know. So I feel it is their right to know everything and to choose, so that even the legal complications will be less.
Right, legal complications will be less. Now, with that I come to you, Dr. Gayatri. You know, the topic of this discussion today is in some way focused on natural birth. Now, natural birth versus maybe you all would call it artificially assisted birth. This debate of whether a C-section, you have more and more women, in a sense, opting for it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure you are the guys you are the people who are more experienced in this. Some people seem to think that this is less complicated, and of course the pain might be lesser. And do they come asking for a cesarean section, and do you have to sometimes advise them against it, or do you yourself believe that the answer is somewhere in between?
Thank you. Yeah, I would think that the answer is somewhere in between, because there are many other conditions that have been picked up. Now, the reason why cesarean section rates have partially because we are picking up more complications. We are seeing a different set, like Dr. Jyotsna mentioned. We used to see teenage pregnancies, now we are seeing elderly primaries. See, people are giving their professions, their education more importance. They come in for a pregnancy late. Now, associated with it are complications that come with the age. So, if we have more high-risk pregnancies, if they are complicated, then at times the way out would be a cesarean. But at the same time, that is not the end of everything. You can very well have conditions where a patient can deliver. But again, sometimes we are faced with situations where the mother comes and says, I've been through so much, I don't want any complications, I want to go straight for a cesarean. But it's not that cesarean has no complications. So you'll have to put forward to them what are their pros and cons if they go in for a normal delivery, and what it is if they're going for a section, and then you make a decision.
So do you have women and their families coming in asking for an auspicious muhurtam, Rahu Kala, this birth star?
We have our share of those things. They do come. In fact, next week some patient came and said 9:07. I said, sorry, not possible. 9:07. I wish we were God and we could grant you this. It's not happening. So we have patients who are very enthused to deliver normally. Once the pain starts, I tell them, please exercise, go through, keep fit. No, they say they're very keen on a normal delivery, but they don't work towards it. And when the pains start, they're unable to bear it, and then you have the whole family coming and saying, please do a cesarean section. Which I think that the basic message what I want to give you is, if you want a normal delivery, work for it. Please go through, make sure you're fit, and you go through it.
Can I add a comment on this? Yeah, I very well accept with whatever Dr. Gayatri said. At times, suppose it's Akshaya Tritiya or some such auspicious day, some hospitals have done 20 and odd elective deliveries. That is the amount of pressure patients are putting it on obstetricians, and they are giving the muhurtam time between 9:15 to 9:30, 9:30 to 9:45, whatever it is. So at time, not everything is in our hands. Patient probably plans for a C-section tomorrow and she might get into labor today and we are forced to do it today, or it could be vice versa.
I feel that we have to adapt here.
And maybe the flip side is also that there is not so much of an interference from the family.
Yes, to do a C-section, this could be overcome by educating the family and involving them.
Well, that's something.
But I think there have been a lot of changes, like I mentioned initially, compared to the last 2 decades we have seen, and now the involvement of the family is very much there, and at least the urban India is definitely seeing the ocean changes. What was there earlier compared to that, we have seen lot of changes.
Well, the changes hopefully for the better.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, though of course the technology and what we were discussing in the first round of probably patients trying to reach out to doctors in a sort of a this sort of a panic kind of situation, the text messages and sometimes, and that we don't see in the West. The doctors are not so easily available to the patients, are they?
Yes,
I mean, that's something.
Some of our patients who have had their first deliveries somewhere do compare their experiences with the present delivery to previous one.
And what do they tell you about what happens there? Let's say in the US.
They say doctors are easily reachable in India. This message though we have got it from the patients.
Okay, there's at least a parallel story to that. But Anindita, I would now ask you about the ethical issue of what we are talking about. I mean, choosing in circumstances or forcing a doctor in one sense to do a C-section, but that is there. But also the two questions very quickly to you, Anindita, is one on the ethical issue of maternal health care. What do you see? What are the points that you see coming up? And secondly, just because, let's say, people in this room or in this city are a lot more privileged than the women you have seen, the Adivasis and the tribals and, in certain Naxal areas, what are the issues that women in cities face when it comes to maternal health care?
Okay, I'll answer the second one first. Something I've been thinking about and coming across quite a bit is, we keep talking about the digital divide in many aspects of life, which is that some people in India, and we talked about people getting on Google to find out information, and there is a digital divide even now, where, in terms of probably different generations. So while the younger generation is getting on Google and getting answers and all of that, even in urban India, there are enough families that live either with their parents or in-laws, or are quite involved with them. And when there is a digital divide in that sort of situation, I think, and at least I've seen it personally and I've heard of it, there can be situations where the elders in the family are not necessarily as aware of new developments as the youngers are. And so this thing that
so there's a clash, you're saying?
There's a clash, and there's also, it's not true that myths have disappeared, or that people from our background are not still doing certain things that are unscientific or all of that. For example, the thing of malish after pregnancy for the baby, not so much for the mother, but for the baby, I think there are very divided opinions on that in the first 3 months, whether vigorous malish should be done.
I'm sure there are going to be questions coming up on whether malish is a good thing or not.
Yeah, and it's something that traditionally has come down to us and all of that. But then there are some doctors nowadays and who feel that sort of vigorous malish should not be done in the first 3 months at least. So, things like that, I think there is still space and there is still a need to address gaps in information or awareness. And I don't know if it's possible for our doctors, however reachable they are, to necessarily address each and every one of those myths. So, possibly the media or public information systems have to increase in some way, maybe, to address that, especially for the older generation, because they do influence the youngers.